Hello, I'm Samantha Simmons. You're watching The Context on BBC News.
This street, this road, deserted now, one of the main roads through Jenin, has seen this kind of activity so many times since the Hamas attacks last October. But this operation looks a bit different.
We take the measures necessary to prevent terror activities in Israel and in Judea and Samaria, and we will do whatever is necessary.
For all the talk of Iran and so on, fundamentally what this is about is this long-running, immutable conflict between Israelis and Palestinians for control of the land.
More on all those stories coming up. First, the latest headlines. The FBI has released more details on the assassination attempt on the Republican presidential nominee. FBI officials said the gunman, Thomas Crooks, mounted a sustained and detailed effort to attack a major gathering before selecting the Trump rally in Pennsylvania. Britain and Germany have announced that they are working on a new bilateral treaty to entrench cooperation on areas such as security, the economy and people-to-people contacts. The plans were revealed at talks in Berlin between Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz and the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Thames Water has told the regulator it won't survive unless it increases bills by nearly 60% over the next 5 years. The UK's biggest water company has been responding to Ofwat's plans for water bills, which would see rises of 23%. Thames has debts of £15 billion. And the opening ceremony of the Paralympics is underway in Paris. Around 4,400 athletes from around the world will take part in 22 sports. For the first time, the ceremony is being held outside of a stadium in the heart of Paris. We start in the Middle East, where at least 9 people have been killed in the biggest Israeli operation in the occupied West Bank for 20 years. Last month, the International Court of Justice ruled that Israel's continued occupation of the area, captured in 1967, breached international law. Violence has been increasing in the occupied West Bank since Hamas's deadly attack on the 7th of October, with the UN saying more than 650 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli soldiers or settlers there. Overnight, Israeli forces simultaneously went into the cities of Jenin, Tulkarm, Nablus and Tubas on a scale that hasn't happened for decades. Correspondent Lucy Williamson reports from Jenin.
It was a message of force, delivered quietly at first. Israeli soldiers seeking their targets, street by Palestinian street. At dawn, hundreds of troops, backed by armoured bulldozers, arrived in the refugee camps of Tulkarm, Nablus, Tubas, Jenin, home to armed Palestinian groups and unarmed civilians. At least 9 Palestinians have been killed. Hamas says 6 of them were its fighters. Masoud Najjar said he was injured when he opened the door to his house after some young men nearby asked for water.
We felt like something came down on us from the sky and there was an explosion. I was unaware of what was going on. When I put my hand on my chest, it was all shrapnel and blood.
In Jenin, army vehicles surrounded the city's 2 main hospitals. Ambulances stopped and checked by military jeeps. Israel's foreign minister said Iran was financing and arming groups in the West Bank, describing it as a war for everything that Israel must win.
The IDF and our security forces are operating in Tulkarm, Jenin and other places from which murderous attacks have been launched. We will fight to eliminate terrorism wherever it emerges.
Israel's army has been targeting the same areas in the same cities week after week for the past 10 months, determined to dismantle the armed Palestinian groups based here. Now it's launched a wider, more coordinated operation across the West Bank on a scale not seen for 20 years. Arriving in Jenin today, the West Bank head of the Red Crescent. You've had 10 months of these sorts of incursions. How worried are you by what's happening today?
I'm very much worried because it seems there's a new stage. There's a new, they are scaling up their operation. When they talk about evacuating civilians, and using the Air Force to bombing the camps, this reminds us of Gaza.
Tonight, explosions and gunfire in Jenin's refugee camp. This city, full of unmarked battlegrounds, roads and alleyways where armed Palestinians test the army's control. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Jenin.
I'm joined now by Rina Shah, former Republican congressional advisor and political strategist, and Andrew Fisher, former director of policy for the Labour Party. Welcome to you both. Great to have you on the programme. Well, let's get your reaction, first of all, Rina, to events in the West Bank today. What's your analysis of developments there and what it could mean for the region?
I think this instability which we're seeing right now will further continue because this is a shock. It does feel like there's been a shift and a real change. And as Americans, we are waiting to hear from Biden and Blinken about what stage we've entered. As we now know, there is a great American frustration with the American backing of Netanyahu. But what we know right now is that, again, more lives are on the line. And what does that mean for getting more of the hostages back to Israel and stopping the killing of innocent Palestinians? I think at this point, many American lawmakers, particularly on Capitol Hill, when you're looking at the Republican side, you see a sincere backing for Israel and that not going to a phase where they're letting Israel down. That's always the talk from the right. But particularly on the left, after we've come off of a really strong Democratic National Convention in which there was a serious tip of the hat to those Americans who are frustrated by what it seems like the Biden-Blinken duo's actions in Gaza. We are not sure what level of change there will be from our administration. I think so. What we're seeing right now in Jenin, it is leaving me and many other Americans pretty dumbfounded as to how our lawmakers can respond and will respond as we move into the fall.
OK, and Andrew, what's your view on developments today?
Well, look, these are clearly terrorist acts by the Israeli state, which has illegally occupied the West Bank for 57 years now. It has been in contravention of international law, armed, aided and abetted by the US, by Britain, and has killed 650 Palestinians in the West Bank since October, in the last 10 months. In the West Bank, this is not Gaza, where over 40,000 civilians have been killed. This is the West Bank. No connection, very small Hamas presence there. This is about a land grab. This is about the ethnic cleansing of the West Bank. And you heard from the Israeli spokesperson there at the top of the programme who described those areas as Judea and Samaria, not as the West Bank and Gaza. This is about building a greater Israel, wiping Palestine off the map, which has been, unfortunately, the long-held project of the Likud party, which is in power, and its fascist supporters. And I don't use that term lightly. There are people in Netanyahu's government who describe themselves as fascists, one of whom has been overseeing security in the West Bank. These are terrorist acts. And it's not just me saying that. The head of the Shin Bet, the Israeli security agency, wrote to Netanyahu and said, and I quote, I want to get the words right, Jewish terrorism in the West Bank is out of control. The settler groups are a stain on Judaism. That is the head of the Israeli security agency saying this, and they are being supported to the hilt by Netanyahu's cabinet. These are war crimes.
There are different views in the Israeli government, of course, and it's being reported today that Hamas itself had said that some 6 of its fighters have been killed in this operation today. Rina, when you talk about US influence also today when it comes to settlers, the US has imposed sanctions, haven't they, on an Israeli non-profit and a Jewish West Bank settlement security official. And what do you make of that? Is it significant?
Not significant enough, because here on our shores, all the talk is about Gaza and less about the West Bank. And today could be that turning point. But again, we're not hearing from our lawmakers enough talk that says we have the back of innocent Palestinians. We just hear a lot of pro-Israel sentiment across the board. And that is because we have a very strong lobby in AIPAC. And that is the American Israel Political Action Committee. Look, I'm not the first person to say on this network that the influence of big money and of big donors, particularly those with Jewish backgrounds, is severe for American politics. Everybody feels some kind of way, but we do know here, again, in the United States, there is just not enough anti-Netanyahu talk in general. And I fear that until Netanyahu is no longer in a position of power, we will not see any change to the American position on how we deal with what could be considered terrorism on many levels. And innocent Palestinians continuing to wrongly die, all in the name of trying to eradicate Hamas.
I'm sure there are many who would disagree with you about the extent of Jewish influence and where it comes from. Andrew, we have a new Labour government, and the issue of the war in Gaza caused it some problems during campaigning, didn't it? What do you want to see Sir Keir Starmer do in terms of supporting the Palestinian people and exerting influence on the Israeli government?
Well, look, in opposition, Labour was demanding that the Conservative government publish the legal advice on which we were still sending arms to Israel. And it's after 12 days of not publishing that advice, they then criticised David Cameron, who was then the Foreign Secretary, for not publishing it. Well, Labour have been in power for over 50 days now. They've not published the legal advice. They've not stopped the arms sales. They clearly think that the International Criminal Court issuing arrest warrants for war crimes is not a basis on which to suspend arms going into that process. The International Court of Justice investigating a plausible case of genocide is not case enough. These continued incursions on what is an illegal occupation of the West Bank, which is 57 years long, is not reason enough to stop. I have to say, I don't think people have got faith in this Labour government to do the right thing on Israel. And that's why you saw a number of independents elected in the election at the expense of Labour. And I suspect that sentiment will continue to grow until Labour acts.
OK, well, we will see. Obviously, we don't have anyone from the Labour Party here at the moment to respond. Thank you for now. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Now let's turn to the US. Two big developments for Donald Trump in the past day. The FBI has released more details on the assassination attempt on the Republican presidential nominee. FBI officials said the gunman, Thomas Crooks, mounted a sustained and detailed effort to attack a major gathering before selecting the Trump rally in Pennsylvania. Crooks searched more than 60 times for information about the Republican presidential candidate and his then rival, President Joe Biden, before registering for the Trump rally in early July. Separately, on Tuesday, the US Department of Justice issued revised charges against the former president relating to his alleged attempts to interfere in the 2020 election after his loss to Joe Biden. Government lawyers were forced to amend their case because of a landmark Supreme Court ruling that former presidents have broad immunity from criminal prosecution. The new indictment reworks the language of the accusations. In reply on his Truth Social platform, Donald Trump accused the Department of Justice of trying to resurrect a dead witch hunt. Let's get more with our panel now, Rina and Andrew. Rina, what's your view on the latest information we have about Thomas Crooks? It doesn't actually reveal a motive so far, does it?
No, we don't have a motive, and we may never get one because, again, the shooter is dead. And what has happened right now is that the United Secret Service has come under fire. What's happened also is that truly the Americans that are on the camp of this being a deep state activity, those who've been ardent supporters of Trump for a long time are saying that there are people within the government who want to take Trump out. What we've learned now continues to give ammo to their arguments. But at the same time, there are people that have bought into a conspiracy theory that this was a staged stunt by Trump. So look, whichever way you're slicing this pie, there was clearly a failure by the United States Secret Service. The director has stepped down, the one that was serving at the time of the assassination attempt. And we see the interim director has taken over there. But I don't know what this can all lead to except for better security for future future presidential candidates, and again, former presidents. Our former presidents do enjoy Secret Service protection for many years after they leave office, as do their family members. That was put into an act by Congress years ago. But this is all the taxpayer dollars, so we deserve answers. But at the end of the day, this kind of changes nothing.
OK, so let's talk about these revised charges against former President Donald Trump. What do you make of that? Is it going to impact on him and his campaigning and on the election result?
I don't see any short-term implications of what Jack Smith, again, the special counsel at our Department of Justice, I don't see any implications of his actions right now. They've had to reword things. So this is all a lot of legalese and getting lost in the weeds right now because this was what was required after our Supreme Court said that presidents are essentially kings. I mean, it's a very shocking Supreme Court decision for them to say that this immunity that presidents enjoy is really something that continues to protect Donald Trump. I think this made the court look quite partisan in many ways, though our court is the highest court in the land and doesn't have any partisan bent to it. They're supposed to, again, be justices that are supposed to look at the law, interpret it, and push things down to a lower court or uphold a lower court's ruling if need be. But what many Americans see now is that Donald Trump, 3 Supreme Court justices that he appointed are essentially protecting him from prosecution by the special counsel. So one side screams weaponization of the judiciary, and the other side screams the same. We are at a moment which I think there's a bit of an impasse. So unless something bombastic can come out in a court ruling, we sit in the same place that we sat when the Supreme Court decided to extend that immunity to Donald Trump.
Yeah, Andrew, what's your view on this new indictment? Will it just re-energise his supporters as he shouts witch hunt very loudly?
Look, I think the people who support Donald Trump fervently will support Donald Trump fervently come what may. They're detached from reality, as you can see. And the people who oppose Donald Trump are probably going to continue to oppose Donald Trump. So I don't think it'll have a major impact on the election. I think we ought to take seriously the accusations that are of what he's accused of. This is election fraud, of trying to pressure officials into not endorsing a result of an election, of lying about the election result and trying to spread lies about it and incite a riot, incite a coup, effectively, on January the 6th. So these are really, really serious allegations about somebody who was the president of the United States refusing to accept a democratic election result. And we see this increasingly, I think, in what is increasingly a kind of post-truth, post-democratic movement within the far right of politics. You see it with Viktor Orban in Hungary, limiting the rights of the media and other institutions. You see it with Narendra Modi in India, and indeed with Benjamin Netanyahu domestically in Israel, which is why there were huge protests against him for his court reforms that he was trying to push through there. There is a lack of accountability. These people want to be kings, not democratically accountable presidents or prime ministers. They want to be kings, monarchs, absolute power. Okay. And they're very, very dangerous people. This is trying to unwind democracy. And I think it's very important that people wake up to this, because it could go down a very, very dangerous path very quickly.
OK, well, we'll leave that legal side of things to the side for the moment. There is a bit of a fresh controversy, though, around the campaigning. On Monday, Donald Trump participated in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Arlington National Cemetery. US media outlet NPR is reporting that 2 members of the Trump campaign team had a verbal and physical altercation with an official at the cemetery after the person tried to prevent staffers from filming in a section of the cemetery where recent casualties are buried. A spokesman for the Trump campaign denied the incident took place. But a statement from the cemetery to NPR said, "We can confirm there was an incident and a report was filed." Well, Rina, what's your view on this? Is this kind of incident damaging for the Trump campaign or just embarrassing?
Neither. This campaign has been acting thuggish for a long time. The behavior is typical of Donald Trump and his minions. This is how they behave when they don't get their way. They believe that they are above the law. They believe that a president like the former president Donald Trump has absolute power, which is quite rich because they accuse Biden and Democrats before Biden, who were in the Oval Office, of governing by executive order. I saw no difference when Trump was in office. What Trump's acolytes essentially do is always try to put the shoe on the other foot, but they fail because they are unable to look at themselves and their own actions. They felt they had every right for Trump as a former president to not only be there to do this wreath-laying ceremony, very much a political stunt too, in which they wanted to gain points. And so, of course, and they don't believe they were above the law in any way. They feel that they have absolute right to do that.
Okay, thanks. So where are we at right now in the presidential race in terms of polling? Well, one of the first major surveys post-Democratic National Convention shows the vice president holding a 4-point lead over Donald Trump. And this is the state of play longer term as of August the 28th. Analysis group 538 has the vice president up an estimated 3.4 points over Donald Trump. Their measure is built on polling averages from state and national polls. You can see over the course of the last month that gap between the two candidates slowly emerging. Well, Andrew, at this stage of the campaign, with a couple of months still to go till the actual election, how important, how significant is this polling data?
I think it's really significant. I mean, if you think back to what the polls were saying when Biden was still the Democrat candidate after the election debate, Trump was ahead. So this is quite a reversal for Donald Trump. He's gone down in the polls. Harris has gone up. It seems more of the kind of independent, non-aligned voters in the US have swung over to her. And that's a really positive thing. It's a positive thing for, I think, anybody who wants kind of a semi-sane person, at least, in charge of the largest military and democracy in the world, but or most powerful democracy in the world anyway. So I think it's very significant. Obviously, the US has like the UK, a very disproportional system, an electoral college where the popular vote doesn't necessarily end up winning you the presidency, as we saw with Hillary Clinton a couple of elections ago. So it is good news, but it's still close. It's only 4 points or 3.4%, depending on which pollster you go by, the difference. So it's reassuring. It's better than where we were, and it will be good news for the Democrats after their convention that they've got this, this poll bump.
Okay, will Trump be rattled, Rina, especially given the fact that polls do get it wrong? As Andrew was saying there, back in 2016, they got it wrong and Trump won.
Well, I disagree that these polls are reassuring. I think it's still very tight. I think that's a bump from a convention that looked great, and we were all expecting that. But the hard part starts after Labor Day, which is this upcoming weekend. I think as we roll into September, I'll be looking to see how much she can increase that lead over Trump. When we saw polls prior to Biden dropping out of the race, we did see her polling tightly with Trump, but rarely seeing her poll above him. Now we're seeing her poll above him, but just slightly. That doesn't give me much confidence as a political strategist. And so, I think the Harris-Walz campaign knows right now that it cannot be complacent, that this is still very much an uphill battle. And I think in the swing states is obviously where we're looking to see the outcome of this race be determined. But in essence, she's still the American public is still getting to know her, despite her being the vice president over these past 4 years. She very much has to do a bit of a reintroduction of herself. And I think maybe perhaps after her first exclusive sit-down interview, she and her running mate, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, will be doing one tomorrow night. I think after that, we can expect for people to start to open their eyes. But still, we have a lot of Americans out there not fully paying attention. So I do expect her to increase the lead if these interviews start to go well.
Yeah, OK, let's talk about the vice presidential nominees. History tells us that they don't necessarily win or lose a presidential election, but nevertheless, they are a key campaign component. In 2024, we're seeing a battle of two self-described Midwest guys, Republican Senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance, and for the Democrats, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. And they've both been out on the campaign trail meeting with voters. This is what happened when J.D. Vance went to a donut shop in Georgia.
I'm J.D. Vance. I'm running for Vice President of Tennessee.
Okay.
We're going to do 2 dozen.
Okay.
Yep. How long have you worked here?
I've been here since the beginning of July
Okay.
of this year.
Okay, good. How about you, sir?
Almost 2 years.
Okay, good. How long is this?
Ouch. So that interaction is getting a lot of attention online. One of the clips has more than 32 million views alone. It's being compared to this from the same week of Governor Walz at a sandwich shop in Nebraska.
Sorry to hold things up for you. You know, we really came just to go to runs, and then we did a little rally on the side.
No kidding. Amazing. Amazing. Oh my gosh, it's such a problem. I'm from here, right here. I went to school.
Did you really?
Well, Rina, they couldn't have been more different in terms of the responses and reactions from people in those shops. But what kind of impact are they realistically having? Lots of views, but will that translate into votes?
It definitely can. You know, look, a hopeful message, the one of joy, is what the Harris-Walz campaign is relying on right now. And when you see Governor Walz walk in and say, hey, we came here for you, that's retail politicking at its finest. You know, he seems to be quite affable and easy to get along with. J.D. Vance seems a little rough around the edges in terms of his interpersonal relations. His interactions with people seem a little forced at times. You don't have to be a fan of either guy to see the distinct difference between the two Midwest guys, as they're dubbing themselves. Of course, there's an age difference here. J.D. Vance is a young father. Tim Vance is a bit of an older father. Tim Walz is sitting in a governorship right now. J.D. Vance is a U.S. senator right now. But again, this is about the personality, and J.D. Vance does not seem as comfortable as Walz, and that may look to some people like it matters to them. They may want to turn out for Walz because he kind of projects this, aw shucks, I'll fix your car broken on the side of the road attitude. And that's what people are seemingly liking about him since he was named Harris's pick. And only because I mentioned polls earlier, I do want to say J.D. Vance did not give Trump any kind of boost in the polls after he was named a running mate. And Walz, after a week after he was named Harris's running mate, it seemed that there seemed to be a renewed attention to that campaign. So that's something a lot of political strategists like me are looking out for.
OK, and Andrew, when we look at elections, how carefully choreographed are these kind of drop-in events at, at shops, different places, schools, hospitals? Are they vetted? Are the people vetted beforehand? And if so, what's gone wrong in the Vance campaign that they got this one so wrong?
Well, I think you see there it wasn't very well choreographed. And I think, as Rina said, J.D. Vance is not a particularly warm, friendly, he's slightly socially awkward, it seems to me. Not particularly likable on many levels, really, if you delve into his politics as well. But, he is quite awkward. So some politicians are good at those sort of things. I mean, if you think back, a long time now, over 30 years, to John Major, who was, not on my wing of politics, but was very good on a soapbox, would put his little upturned step on the pavement and speak to people. Tony Blair was always seen as quite natural, a bit smarmy perhaps, but again, very comfortable around people. And other people are more stiff and awkward. And I think those images do matter to voters. They do pick up on those signals about whether somebody's likable, about how trustworthy they are, about how other people react to them. Those things are important. But ultimately, this election isn't going to be determined, like any election, by the secondary characters in it. It's going to be a choice between Harris and Trump. Okay. And, that should make it clear for people, I would hope.
Andrew, Rina, for now, thanks very much. We'll have more from you very shortly. I'll see you after this short break.
Hello there. We've certainly seen some contrasting weather conditions across the country today. Out to the west, it's been cloudy and often wet once again. This was Chorley in Lancashire this morning. Some of the rain really quite heavy, clearing away to some drizzly, murky conditions. The best of the sunshine, well, high cloud, yes, across East Anglia and South East England, but that's where we had the sunshine and the warmth. In fact, temperatures peaking in the high 20s by the middle part of the afternoon. Probably too hot for many of us, but as those weather fronts that brought the rain sink south and east, no rain on it, but they're going to introduce fresher air as they move through overnight. So on Thursday morning, then we'll start off with a